Other than that, I think that is the lay of the land for we've got the EOC. If you need anything else or have a question, feel free to grab me or Dutch back there in the corner. We'll be able to help you out. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over here to Mock and Stephanie and learn a bit more about their programs. So take it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Everybody, can you hear us okay? Hear me okay? Great. I feel very formal up here with this elevated desk and looking down. But thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned, my name is Mock Sucheska. I oversee Global Neighbors, which will be the new Refugee and Immigrant Welcome Center, as you can see right across the street at 1900 Carpenter Avenue. I'll provide a high-level overview of where we started with this project, or at least how it started, kind of where we are currently and what we anticipate in the next year or so as far as construction, program implementation, and then overall sustainability. So this concept or project didn't really start this last year. It's been an idea that has been floating around this community for some time, for at least, I would say, 10 to 15 years. The idea of a one-stop shop welcome center really stemmed from a need that our refugee newcomers were experiencing, primarily as they were being resettled to Des Moines, and really the challenges they faced navigating our complex system, not just the United States system, but Des Moines, Central Iowa, and really the greater state of Iowa. There are services and resources available to our community members as we speak, and even before. But the biggest challenge was really getting access to those resources and being able to navigate those resources once accessibility was obtained. So when we talk about accessibility, it's really the geographic locations of all of our service providers across town that made it difficult. Public transportation, as we know, is available, but at times difficult to access and difficult to navigate. If one doesn't have their own private means of transportation, or if their social services agency isn't able to provide that support, a lot of that navigation is left to that individual or that family. So an idea sparked that at the time was led by the Greater Des Moines Partnership and many partners that are here today, really looking at how to help alleviate some of those navigation challenges. And what came of that was an assessment that was conducted, feedback that was gathered, and a welcome center idea was created. How can we look to an area or a space that refugees, service providers, and the broader community could come under one roof to help support the successful resettlement and integration of new Iowans and newcomers to our community? That idea sort of fell by the wayside. We had global circumstances that affected the overall development of that project. Think Afghanistan, think about Ukraine, COVID, derechos, and everything and anything in between. So fortunately, about a year and a half ago, now almost 2 years, Polk County decided to really step up and take a leadership role in wanting to continue to invest in this idea. How that would manifest to an actual project or a place was sort of under the works, but we were happy to find out that there was a building available. At the time was occupied by HHS. When COVID occurred, everyone went work from home, and the building stayed vacant. It wasn't occupied, it wasn't being used. So it really made sense that if we had an available space, why not look to turn this into a welcome center? And that's what we will talk about today. The language in particular that we're choosing to use with Global Neighbors is very intentional. Although intended for immigrants and refugees, we are opening our doors, supports, and services to the broader public. Although programming and those that will be occupied in the building will be refugee and immigrant facing, we really want to fulfill that spirit of being a global neighbor and supporting all of our neighbors. So we'll talk a little bit about that as I show you the design of how the space was configured. But we're very grateful and personally very thankful to Polk County and its leadership and really helping to step up and support this work, much needed work, and a very unique model, as you'll come to find out. There are welcome centers that exist across the country, in the Midwest, and even some in Iowa, but not to this extent. And we'll talk about why that is. So you're all familiar with across the street. That will be Global Neighbors. It's roughly 18,000 square feet that has been configured into a space conducive for learning education, and integration. Integration is really at the foundation of this work, as is supporting our ethnic community-based organizations. Stephanie will talk a little bit more about that, what it looks like on the ground and day to day, as she's very close to all of our ECBOs that we work with. So if you're familiar with that space, where I've been inside of it, you remember it was just some partitions and cubes, kind of run down, not really taken care of to the way it should have been. We're happy that we are where we are now in partnership with BBS Architecture and Engineering, and really the bulk of the work that was done by our Polk County General Services friends. We're really thankful for the work that they have done. So the 18,000 square feet will be configured into essentially a learning and welcome center. What you see before you is a design, a rough design in its early stages of a master plan of how this space would look. We held community conversations with our ethnic community-based organizations, service providers, nonprofit partners, and some of our broader coalition partners as well, that included state government, county government, and even some of our private sector businesses and corporations, I guess. And so looking at, what would make sense in helping support our refugees and immigrants, but also how that space can be conducive for them in administering programming and supports. What you see before you is the design that came forth that was developed by BBS. So as you walk through the space, you see that it's very heavy on a collective approach, from classrooms and a computer lab to Des Moines Public Schools moving their welcome center in the space, to having that light blue carved out area for our ACBOs to work out of. Again, those are ethnic community-based organizations. This is really at the core of our work. When we first started this project, we were looking at what long-term integration means. All the services, or the majority of services that are provided to newcomers, are time sensitive, either 90 to 180 days or shortly after that. Those services end. Refugees and immigrants are then supported by these ECBOs who are working pro bono, who are majority volunteer staff, and don't have the funding and supports needed to really run a sustainable nonprofit. Many of them have 501 status, but they just don't have the infrastructure needed to help support the vast array of services and needs our community faces. So, at the core of that, alleviating some of those challenges from having space to access to resources and also being part of a broader network, this Welcome Center sought to rectify that in a way. So these ECBOs will be located within our Welcome Center. They will work as a collective. They will get supports from Polk County from an infrastructural standpoint, technical assistance, but really will be leading this show, continuing to support and provide the services they do respectively within potentially existing agencies or spaces they have, but also using ours as needed, whether that's hoteling, whether that's providing classroom and educational supports and services, or even the center serving as a cultural event center. That was a big piece that also came up during our conversations. Was we have large communities, but we have nowhere to go, or the places that we have to go is really, really expensive and we can't afford it. How can we also configure Global Neighbors to help support and be conducive in those areas? So the light blue space, the 2 classrooms, there's a partitioned wall there that can be turned into a large gathering and meeting area. We will be operating during traditional Polk County hours, but also looking at some non-traditional hours as well to meet the community where they're at. Many of our folks work third shift. Many are working 2 or 3 jobs. Weekends, evenings are very important to them. So how can we be more flexible to help support their needs where it's not just traditional 8 to 4:30, 9 to 5. So we will hopefully have staffing and supports in place to help keep those doors open in the evenings and some of those non-traditional hours to help with those program services and events. I always like to share this slide because the arts are a very important piece when it comes to this work. We don't want this to be just another government building that people come to, or a place that they won't feel welcome. Feeling at home, feeling safe, having that sense of culture and belonging is very important at the core of this work. So we will be working and partnering with local refugee and immigrant artists to look at putting together murals on the inside of the building that will show the journey that will show the immigrant journey or refugee journey, but also on the outside of the facade of the building, the eastern facing wall, right, where the freight elevator is at, we'll be looking to put some outdoor murals as well. In some of the designs that we discussed in partnering with BBS and the feedback we got from the community, having sculptures in different areas that are conducive to healing and warmth and sort of a soft approach as well, because we are working with individuals that are coming with trauma and lots of lived experiences that we may or may not be privy to or understand, but can empathize with. And so working with local agencies around mental health, around healing, around a holistic approach will really be incorporated into this building, as well as the art and the design overall. So that's kind of where we're at with the space itself. The $1 million question is timeline and opening. I'm happy to report that we submitted plans to the city about 2 weeks ago for permitting. Construction, small light construction has already begun on the space, and we're going to continue to move forward on that in the coming weeks. Our timeline right now of opening is March of 2027. So that may fluctuate depending on the circumstances, but we are on general services timeline, and we appreciate them and respect that timeline, but also respect that there are other projects that they have to lead and take on. So we're very excited. Again, this is the furthest we've been with this area and with this approach. We're going around and meeting with the community, sharing updates. And I gotta say, a lot of people are very, very excited from just how long we've come far and where we are going. So happy to answer questions, any thoughts people may have after we talk about RACI.
Thanks. Okay. So I'm just going to, again, kind of try to give you a higher level overview of what RACI does, a little bit of the history, and then kind of how that looks moving forward in conjunction and partnership with the Welcome Center. So the Refugee Alliance of Central Iowa, or RACI, were founded back in 2014. There were a lot of agencies doing a lot of different work when it came to newcomer communities in the early 2000 and 2010s, and a lot of it was fragmented. There were a lot of people who thought that they had to recreate programming or services from scratch. There was a ton of funding that potentially was being wasted without people being clear about this service is actually offered here, or this program already exists, or we don't, maybe we don't need to do this because these other programs can help alleviate some of those needs. And there were so many of the major direct service providers that really saw that redundancy, that they came together and formed a task force really to look at the issue and to see what the community needed. And so from that, RACI was formed and has grown to actually over 900 community partners. And that's not just, we're not just limited to Central Iowa. We do have partners from across the state. I know a lot of you were at the Refugee Summit last Tuesday, which is an event that we help organize. And we had about over 400 people there from all across the state. So I know that a lot of you saw that as well. We had a lot of school districts that were new this year that were great to see come participate. But yeah, we're about over 900 organizations or individuals or groups that are members. We work, of course, with the refugee resettlement agencies. So there's 4 in Des Moines. IRC has a office in Iowa City. Catholic or USCRI had an umbrella organization out of Cedar Rapids. And LSI has resettlement efforts happening in Waterloo and in Sioux City as well. We also partner with some of the other agencies. World Relief out of Davenport, and the Mary Truly Community House in Sioux City was also resettling for a while as well. So we work with all the resettlement partners, local government, city, county, state, the schools, of course, health providers, mental health providers, family service agencies, and direct service organizations. And then, of course, our most important members, no offense to everyone else, but are the refugee and immigrant community leaders themselves. And just to kind of put into context the importance really of the Welcome Center and of this work, in Des Moines Public Schools, we have over 140 specific ethnic groups represented. And that's 10 or more students who speak specific dialects. So that's more than Atlanta, Georgia, more than many of the major municipalities around the United States. And really that's due to Iowa's long-standing leadership in the refugee resettlement space. So there's a lot of to have over 140 independent, nonprofit agencies isn't necessarily the most appropriate way to serve those communities. So having this kind of centralized place where everyone can come together, kind of no matter where they're from or what their needs may be, if they're new to our community, is going to be so helpful for tens of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands really in central Iowa, outside of the city of Des Moines proper. And our work is shaped a lot by obviously the ECBO leaders, and the community leaders, but also our steering committee, which is, I always joke, I have 13 bosses. And then of course, Mock, who's my direct supervisor. But that steering committee is made up of the resettlement agencies, Polk County, the city of Des Moines, the Iowa Bureau of Refugee Services, and then people with lived experience and coming from those ECBO partners as well. RACI as a network has work groups that were formed after identifying unmet needs in specific sectors. That includes advocacy, economic mobility, which is really a combination of housing, employment, and financial education. Education, that's K through 12 and adult. Health and mental health, and then language justice and our legal network as well. The majority of these groups meet pretty much kind of monthly, often virtually, to address what are the current issues, what are the current, what's happening right now. A lot of it is, there have been a lot of changes this year, kind of over 400 policies that impact these communities. What are the current needs? How do we help best serve students? How do we, best serve families and keep everybody informed and safe and continuing on their journey to reaching full civic engagement and adjustment into being new here in Iowa. Okay, so services that RACI provides, a lot of times people are like, oh, like what does RACI do? Like how many clients do you serve? And that's hard to articulate because we're not as a refugee resettlement agency where we can say, last year we resettled 432 individuals and quantify, our outcomes in very specific ways. We offer a lot of services, but just not in, I think, the traditional way that a lot of direct service provider agencies may be able to kind of report on those outcomes. Providing updated information. So this, obviously, I mentioned the changes that have happened in this since January, since the change of the administration, policies that do impact these communities greatly, whether it be through eligibility for English language classes at DMAC or immigration status changes and kind of revocations of temporary protected status or other visa statuses. So those immigration updates, community events, volunteer and engagement opportunities, if there's funding opportunities that these agencies could benefit from. This is something that we got really good at during COVID. During COVID, a lot of these communities were the essential workforces that made up meat production, agriculture, food production, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, transportation. They were the essential workers that were most, adversely impacted and affected by COVID. And getting information out to these communities is hard. They're unable, for the most part, if they're not English or Spanish speaking, able to call 911. They're not able to call 211. They're not able to call their doctor's offices. And we're talking tens of thousands of people who help keep those economies and those sectors together. So that outfacing information is very important. We also help disseminate important community information out to those leaders. So again, I mentioned COVID, but also funding and training opportunities and anything else that can impact the communities. And then on the other side, we help disseminate information out to, service providers. So if there's really great trainings that are happening or ways to help show up and support the, ECBO events or different cultural events, we want to make sure that the broader community has that information as well, which we do. We have a newsletter that goes out every Thursday morning. It can be long. It is very scrollable though. I try to make it, you can go through the new It goes kind of by calendar events and then training opportunities, a lot of times that are free, which are amazing and really helpful for people working with those communities. Funding opportunities, job opportunities, and then kind of ongoing resources that don't necessarily have a calendar date. So it can be long, but it's an incredibly detailed and great place to learn about things that are impacting newcomer communities. So that's that on our website is kind of how we get information out to the broader community. And then in terms of getting emergency information out to our community leaders, our refugee immigrant community leaders, that's kind of a process that we developed very quickly during COVID. We also have, we help plan 3 events for the state of Iowa. That is Iowa Refugee and Immigrant Day on the Hill, which is in February and March. Our role in that is to really offer a civics engagement training to community leaders. We want to see our refugee and immigrant community leaders in positions of power where they're able to advocate on behalf of themselves, or they're maybe part of the planning committee or part of the steering committee or different councils helping to make those leadership position or decisions. What we do for that day is we really just kind of help bring everyone together and then offer a civics engagement training to teach community leaders how bills are made, who does what, how they can get involved, how they can advocate on behalf of their communities, or how they can ask questions about the impact, things like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So Iowa MMJ, helps to provide this training on how bills are made and who does what, but then how they can also engage with elected leaders. We also help plan World Refugee Day, which is June 20th. That's a date established by the United Nations. And this oftentimes is a very large one-day celebration where we purchase food from 20 plus different restaurants and give out all those samples for free. We have cultural performing artists. We have fashion shows, dancing, music. We have community partner booths where people can hand out information and just connect. And it's really an event put on by and for the communities. And it is 100% free. We fundraise a lot for that event to make sure that there's no barrier to people attending. It's open to the broader community, to anybody that wants to show up to learn or support. And DART gives us free transportation for the entire day for that too, which is great. And we help other communities around the state plan or partner with documentary screenings, speaker series, things like that. And then of course the Iowa Refugee Summit, which many of you attended last Tuesday. And this, we brought over, 400 partners from around the state. And really it's a day for people to learn how to serve refugee and immigrant communities, how to work with families, how to communicate with families, hear from, the communities themselves, what the current needs are, for the state. And it was, I've been going through feedback all morning.
You're one of the comments that.
Yeah, I had someone from a woman who has been in the education field for decades say that it was the best conference she's ever been to. The most relevant and useful conference she's ever been to in her career. So it's incredible that we have many people who attend. I have attended national conferences for newcomers and I might be biased, but I can easily say that our summit offers both in quantity and quality of information, just exponentially more. And for a fraction of the price. So yeah, if you didn't attend this year, but you'd like to attend next year, it is open to anybody and everybody who would like to come and learn. It's a day out of your schedule, which I know is a lot to ask for people in the first place. But we have, again, a very long history of real international leadership in this space. And a lot of people who have been doing this work for years and years. We have hundreds and hundreds of years of experience in the room, and it's a really great day. So, a lot of the ECBOs, again, a lot of our community leaders, we've been doing this work very, kind of here, there, in different areas, in different pockets, and not hodgepodge, but I mean, just in some aspects, really trying to just put out fires or address this situation, and being able to come together under one roof will be incredibly helpful. I mean, during the last 5 years, we've seen some of our South Sudanese, we've seen some of our Liberian serving organizations, communities that have thousands of people here, and just in Des Moines alone, their ECBOs have had to close because they haven't been able to pay for the brick and mortar location, they don't have staff. The Bhutanese community is a great example. That organization has been functioning very well for over 10 years, and all of those leaders and board members work at least one full-time job. And so they're doing that on their, in their free time away from their families. A lot of these agencies do. So having a centralized place for everyone to come together, hopefully will make a positive impact for lots and lots of people in our community. Yeah, I'm happy to, this is information that I've always shared for people if they're wanting to know how to connect with other organizations doing the work or how they can get more involved, but happy to take questions.
Yeah. Any questions, thoughts? We have plenty of time.
I'm Megan Guns with the Polk County Attorney's Office. As you mentioned something up there about the legal and immigration classes that you do you have anybody that comes in to help with assimilation or education as far as helping them understand some of the legal and educational aspect of the criminal code here in Iowa?
Sure. Yes and no. So the resettlement agencies will focus on central Iowa because it's relevant to our community. The 4 resettlement agencies that are here in Des Moines are required to provide what's called a community orientation. It's in their agreement through their cooperative agreement they have with the State Department. And so that that community orientation has a slew of requirements that need to be completed within a 90-day period upon one's arrival when it comes to orienting themselves to the community. So whether that's public safety, whether that's learning about education, learning about the medical system. And one of those pieces is what we call, when I did resettlement, we called it the law of the land kind of classes or legal classes, whatnot. And so those are very high level, basic overview of right versus wrong, as opposed to getting in depth or nuanced when it comes to certain laws, rules that you might be alluding to or not. So one of the things that we want to focus on with Global Neighbors, but also what the ECBOs currently do, and MMJ probably to a certain extent, you can talk more on that, is providing a much more comprehensive, long-term, integrative support and educational opportunities when it not just comes to legal, but when it comes to all of the facets of surviving and thriving in one's new community.
And here's why I ask is one of the, I will say just one of the things that we sometimes notice is there are clearly cultural differences when people are assimilating. And we want to help people understand, that certain things, different forms of potentially maybe corporal punishment that may have been, that can lead to potentially a criminal charge.
Sure.
For example, that if it is noticed by a school system. Sometimes when we're dealing with that, we're going to have them take an educational class. We want to make sure that is something that we want to make sure there's an educational component to that. We don't, because we do understand that that's a crime of moral turpitude. That is going to potentially, you talked about that affecting or potentially the immigration and the legal,
Of course,
how that could affect that aspect of it. But looking at it potentially from a prevention standpoint of, because we deal with it in our office a lot of times on how it affects once it's come into our office, but obviously is there something that we could do?
I was going to ask, how can you help us too? How can we work together?
Together to potentially say, are these things that we could see, or these are things that we could either provide, or these are potentially, and we can talk in a setting outside of this, that these are things that maybe are things that we see are cultural, that are issues that we tend to have defense attorneys say tends to be more of a cultural issue within an assimilation. And I'm happy to give you my card and we can talk about some of those things. Because we want to see if we can look at more of a a cultural educational aspect. We deal with it potentially with OWIs. We deal with and alcohol and drinking, and we potential,
Yeah.
and just understanding where some of those just cultural differences can lead to criminal charges, which could then affect immigration.
Sure.
And let's prevent it instead of dealing with it on the back end and that way.
I think we'll definitely find a time to meet and a talk and what all that looks like. Before you chime in, we agree. I think there needs to be a much more hands-on intentional approach when it comes to this particular component of a new life integration and what it means to live in a new environment. There are lots of cultural barriers and challenges that even though all of this exists to help our community, we still face many challenges. That is, the community faces a lot of challenges to no fault of their own, because as a system, we can only do so much. But I think what we can control is ensuring that we are providing opportunities and accessibility to these communities to get the information and resources they need. So I'll let you.
I would just also mention that we know that people facing especially criminal charges right now, that does impact their ability to continue in their citizenship process. And even during the first Trump administration, I mean, I had clients that were facing deportation proceedings for forcible felonies at the time, but we know that has expanded to include a lot more areas of criminal law. So for now, even before Global Neighbors opens, and I think that some of the partners that we'll partner with for some of those things, we have 3 domestic violence, sexual assault agencies that also serve youth and elders. It's not just, I shouldn't say just, it's not only those programs that cover really the diaspora of the entire planet. So between Luna, Monsoon, and NISA, those 3 agencies have staff who are trained, who are paid, who they have staff that are available, daily to be able to work with. So if you're working with communities who are facing those situations, we really just strongly recommend connecting with them as well. If there's anything that they can help with in terms of the education and training piece now. And then also just another note, a lot of times in the past, especially after we had a large influx of Afghan arrivals, we had the Des Moines Police Department a few different times where we did sessions about the differences in laws and what that means and how criminal charges can impact your citizenship process. And Sergeant Lohr and others from the Des Moines Police Department came and facilitated that. And we've done those too with the Burmese community, with a lot of different communities. So there are resources now. There are agencies that can help now. Let us know.
And to that point, law enforcement is a big component of that as well. And so how do we sort of create maybe a group that can address some of these and talk about some of this stuff? It's not just after the fact, but as you said, preventative. I think it's very important.
Kimberly Graham, I'm the county attorney. I mean, that's why we're here today, is because we want to help educate the immigrant and refugee communities to hopefully prevent them from landing in our office. Once they hit our office, we've got a serious problem. We'd like to prevent that. And, I think it's obviously not going to change every situation, but I think it can change some situations if people understand that maybe what flew under the radar where they came from isn't going to fly under the radar here, and it results in really serious negative consequences for them and their families, and we don't want that. So I'm the reason I wanted to be here today and brought Brett and Megan is I want to figure out when and where and how we can go to that. I mean, we can go to them. We need to go where they are, and I don't know where they are. I don't know if there's any centralized type of places. I mean, if we're a year out from this is going to be, the building would be a great place to do some of this education, but that's a year away. So I don't know if there are any places, events, where we can address larger groups of immigrants or any groups of immigrants, because obviously we want to educate as many people at one time as we can. Or if it's helpful for us to put together like a flyer and work with some of the agencies, nonprofits that you know, so they can translate that into, translate our flyer into whatever language needs to be translated into. We just really want to do what we can to help educate folks, and we don't know how to connect with those people exactly.
The work isn't reliant upon Global Neighbors. So Global Neighbors is just a piece of the entire sort of spectrum of services and outreach that we provide. Currently, Stephanie and I are at River Place. And so we have our quarterly RACI meetings, we have certain gatherings and community events at River Place, and the community is familiar there. So we can always reserve that space, right, Joy and Eric? Yep. So we can always go there. We can always go to community events that are currently happening. It's just a matter of connecting and starting to build our little partnership.
Two months ago, we had a class at River Place on a Saturday and probably had, I don't know, between 40 and 50 Afghan men attend to learn exactly this topic. And it was well received. I'm following up too with friends who were there and who helped organize it. They say it was incredibly helpful.
So then we'll figure something out.
Thank you.
We have space that we could offer that at Clive Community Services. We have that space in the clinic that's used once a week now, so we could do a smaller group. And I'm the only Spanish speaking director in the DMARC network. So we service a lot of Hispanic clients, and also we have an Afghan interpreter as well. So any way we can help as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mark, I know we talked a little bit before too on as Global Neighbors kind of gets everything ready to go for big launch, but you're still doing work now. Talked about one of the things you want to do as you get ready here, kind of trying to refine that mission. We got into it a little bit here with the attorney's office, but for some of the rest of our response agencies, and that includes us, we've talked about emergency preparedness trainings, but with our law enforcement or fire and EMS, what's kind of the vision that you have for being a resource to those agencies, or kind of what feedback are you looking for from them as you try to kind of to plot out how this works? Again, kind of advertised as a one-stop shop for our resettled populations to get that training, but that door kind of swings both ways to where we can connect with our partner agencies and use you as a resource. So kind of what's your vision, or what feedback do you need from those partner agencies?
Well, I appreciate that question, and it's a relevant question. I think first and foremost, we have to get the two communities in front of each other. And so a lot of times where the disconnect happens is the community doesn't know, and then once they become part of the system, it's how does the system respond adequately to cultural differences, nuances, and a lot of the challenges that we face could be alleviated if there was more intentionality in looking at, what are we facing now? What feedback are we gathering from the community? How do we be more intentional in reaching out to Polk County Attorney's Office, to Polk County Emergency Management, to actually bring these two communities together? Global Neighbors can serve as that place, but we have other places and spaces that we can connect folks to. Some of the discussions that we had around emergency preparedness really stemmed from the 2020 derechos that we experienced. Happened to be right across the street because I was at the Bureau of Refugee Services at the time. It was at 1914. That adversely affected a lot of our communities, but those who were not of means, particularly non-native English speakers, were even more impacted. We look at communities in Cedar Rapids, entire apartment complexes decimated. So people had to resort to survivalist tactics and what they were familiar with in refugee camps back in their home countries, and were really living in makeshift tent dwellings for weeks. I went and visited, when that happened. Stephanie and I both went to Cedar Rapids to see that. And so before such occurrences happen, that's a dramatic example, but a relevant one because we experienced that. We need to be a lot more intentional on the front end in engaging the system and bringing the communities into some of these discussions at the table, exposing them, but also helping the system as well. And I use the system broadly, not as a bad thing, but the Polk County system, the Polk County community, the infrastructure is, you have someone like Stephanie and I who come from the community and are embedded in the community, but we also are privileged to be a part of Polk County. So we use that, we serve as a bridge, and we look at and always explore ways that how can we be more, how can we facilitate and coordinate for some of this stuff to be a lot more impactful. So inviting all of you to come to different events, being a part of the Refugee Alliance of Central Iowa, going to the Iowa Refugee Summit, having a booth or a table there. I think those are areas where we can work together. And then just keeping the lines of communication open. I think some of the challenges that we faced early on with the derecho response and at the state level was there was nothing in place for individuals who weren't English speaking. There was more preparation and work done around how to support your pets and how to keep pets safe, and nothing that was culturally responsive to our broader demographic and broader community. So I think just having more intentional discussions, conversations, being open for difficult conversations as well. But as long as we are strengthening our partnerships, I think that will go a long way. I hope that answers your question.
The derecho is a really great example. I know obviously not an emergency that we're gonna see every day, but I mean, we were there 4 days later, 3 days later.
Too.
And there were people sleeping outside because when the emergency response came through, they were like, do you guys need help? And they were like, we're good. Well, they didn't, so they would have continued to live outside until they actually received help. So I think just having connections and communication with organizations like Global Neighbors and the different community partners, really being able to follow up with those communities to figure out what the needs are. If there's, a pandemic response to getting really important information to how do they stay safe? How do they access vaccines, things like that. But also just like if we talked about with a local law enforcement agency the other week, if there's a family that is in an accident and needs help and services, and they lost their car and they don't know how to navigate the insurance, which I feel like I don't know how to sometimes navigate insurance quite, but so, all of these things that are so hard, or like too, in the prevention side of things, trying to teach parents now, like the first snow, you better have every single day of your children's schedule planned for the entire summer. They have to be registered on the first snow, or there's no space left in any of these programs. Like things like this that we can help, just with, the different community partners and communicating and just, when you have situations like this, or you have families that are in need, let us know because we're here to help.
And that's one of our roles as well, is to alleviate some of those potential stressors or challenges that people may assume exist, but there aren't that big of a barrier. And I allude to language. Language has always sort of been at the forefront of, well, if it's always been a challenge. Language will be a challenge, but we have lots of resources that are translated into multiple languages. We have interpretation that exists. It may not be the best, but it exists. Some of these in the moment situations where there is an emergency, everyone's scrambling to figure out what to do. But if there's anything that I would want you to leave with today, is to be maybe a little bit more reassured that there are resources to help immigrants and refugees. It's just a matter of us connecting together on what those are and establishing partnerships, communication, coalitions, and being a part of this together.
So with that, what's kind of so as an officer, what's the best way to get someone who needs some services like that in contact with you?
Can take that one.
Yeah, I think that I think it's varies, right? So if you have a family that's, surviving domestic violence, it's going to be different than if they have a car insurance. Those things are very different.
You're stuck on car insurance.
I mean, it's like that in health. It's a process. I think you like a PhD to navigate that stuff. But would be to just to reach out to us, and we can leave our contact information anytime that anything comes in. I mean, I don't know how many phone calls a day right now with people just navigating just all sorts of community needs. Like we're here, and we're happy to help connect with the appropriate agency or the agency that can provide interpretation, that can provide those follow-up kind of wraparound, care and support services after the fact. It's each situation is very different.
Well, one of the issues that we work with, in addition to kind of what the county attorneys touch on, are non-criminal things like basically difficulty with parenting it's now an Americanized kid in their previous, compared to their previous culture. Do you have any resources or points of contact we can kind of give the parents that are struggling a little bit, some of those resources?
So those three agencies that I mentioned, they have youth programs, they have family service programs. LSI also, we have like on two hands probably the amount of mental health providers that will take non-English, non-Spanish speaking individuals. It used to be under 5, so like under 10 is great. Or progress anyway. So like LSI has those services for for ongoing mental health supports. That is who I would reach out to for that. But those 3 family service DVSA agencies are who I would reach out to first to make sure that the family is being connected, not just like the kid from after the fact, punitive, follow-up. It's hopefully preventative.
And we'll leave some cards so you can reach out.
What a specific question.
We'll go here and then.
A question and then a comment too. In the past, especially with emergency preparedness, I've brought up the role of faith communities. And there's certain faith communities that are deeply involved, the Catholic Charities, LSI, obviously, but the faith communities that many of our refugee and immigrant populations might feel more comfortable with. Can you speak to that, to how you're integrating with, let's say, Muslim or Hindu or the Nepali Bhutanese community? And then the comment is reflecting of the fact that I came from the Sioux City community about 10 years ago. And we had a slow moving disaster that happened along the Missouri River in 2011. And it took the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was releasing water and it was scalding the riverbanks and going into the lowlands, among which Sioux City is part of that lowland. The refugee community definitely volunteered side by side with the other citizens of Sioux City and South Sioux City to sandbag, to do preparations. And so one of the things I think that I would like to hold up is the refugee community wants to be here and wants to be successful and wants to make the community successful. And so I would say celebrating that type of contribution. I was side by side sandbagging with a South Sudanese mother, and she was packing those sandbags way faster than I was. So it's just I think the celebration of the role and the telling them how they can help too, I think is important.
Yeah, I think a lot of those stories get lost in the shuffle, and those experiences are important to highlight.
Yeah.
I think it just goes to show the testament of the community that resettled and welcomed them, helping them feel like home. Refugees and immigrants are resilient people. Many have gone through experiences that they don't wish upon anyone. And I speak from experience, although young when I came to this country. My family's story is one of a refugee story. We came from Bosnia in the early 90s. But I think what is most meaningful to us is that this is now our home too. And we find that just because we came from a different part of the world or speak a different language or have a different culture, it's in addition to what we also have adopted. For example, we love Thanksgiving. Not Thanksgiving in Bosnia. but you know, this is our home. And so we try to find ways, whether it was assimilation to now integration. Uh, we, you know, we want to help and we want to be seen as an equal valued member of society. And I think those stories are extremely important because it shows that disasters impact everyone. It doesn't matter your background, where you come from, or what you look like. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think to your question, you know, how do we engage a broader faith-based sort of coalition and collective? We have that currently in place, but I think to the more culturally specific, there is work to do. I think traditionally, you have churches that have stepped up historically, serving as sponsors of refugees that came in the in the early 60s and 70s to the 90s, the 80s and 90s, and subsequently after. I think a lot of that has to do with the mission of the church and of that faith. Not to say that other faiths don't have a sort of collective community component. But what we've seen and where it's been most successful are the Christian based organizations and churches and organizations. But we have lots of representation from a myriad of cultures, faiths, and different backgrounds, and that will continue to be in place. Whether that's in Global Neighbors, whether that's as a part of a collective with RACI, but there is some more. I know what you're saying, sort of reading between the lines. There is some work to do, and sort of how do we ensure that everyone understands what it's going to take to help support the community.
Yeah, gee, we had a really great breakout session at the summit about faith-based organizations specifically that Senator Trungariat led. And there was representation from the Muslim Community Organization, MCO, to the Mosque on 42nd, the Hindu Cultural Educational Center, HEEC, south side of Des Moines. There are tons of organizations. And MCO, for example, I mean, what they did for people experiencing, you know, adverse effects from COVID, for example, you know, we worked with them during the community foundation had an amount that we were able to help allocate in PPE and other things. But there's a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of work. Shalom Community Impact Center was part of that panel. There's a lot. It's just, I think, a matter of knowing and reaching out. And I think there's some interfaith agencies and different opportunities to go and experience those different mosques and faith centers that are really, really, I think, really great to be part of. I think people that do those programs, either through Drake or Interfaith Alliance, learn a ton. Yeah.
So, in my current role, I'm a mental health correspondent with our crisis intervention team at the police department. So I feel more of like a social work role, but also my previous role, I worked with civil mental health commitments and worked really closely with a lot of like the inpatient psychiatric unit social work teams, and getting people back on Medicaid or individuals that need like long-term care facilities and trying to figure out if they're eligible for Social Security and things like that. I think that there's a lot of social workers that are experts on how to get you set up with Medicaid, how to get you back on Social Security, all those things. But we ran into a lot of issues of like, we needed this paperwork of this visa, and like, I'm not an expert in those at all. Are there any like education opportunities for social work type individuals to learn more about citizenship and visas and refugees? Or is there like a lifeline at your guys' place that those individuals can call? Because I know, especially when it comes down to being in the inpatient psychiatric units, those individuals really oftentimes can't advocate for themselves and make those calls. Is there someone with you guys that like the social workers or myself, if I run into an individual that's needing help and I'm like just absolutely, I know one time I was trying to print off like an I-9 and I'm like, I don't even know what an I-9 is. And I was going in circles. It was a 2 to 3 hour Google session. So I just, yeah. And so I just was wondering if you guys have like a lifeline for those situations.
Anything HHS, Medicaid, health insurance.
Bureau of Refugee Services.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have liaison, like staff who can act as liaison between like our income maintenance and HHS departments and those communities or the refugee resettlement agencies to help expedite or just be able to answer those. Don't Google. Like
Yeah.
save yourself the hours.
Yeah.
Call the Bureau of Refugee Services.
Okay.
And then another to that, when Global Neighbors opens, a lot of these ECBOs also provide and offer what they call either clinics or workshops.
Mhm.
Workshops, either that's a green card clinic or a public benefits application clinic. We will be looking to partner actually with HHS and some individuals who will be volunteering, but also providing education and just overview of what these steps entail. It's not so much the initial step, it's everything that happens after, and that doesn't get done. So we'll be looking to develop some of that programming and supports to our ECBOs and refugees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just use this opportunity to kind of hopefully, if folks here don't already know this, to tell people that immigration law is an extraordinarily specialized, extraordinarily picky area of the law. Please be abundantly cautious and careful when you are talking to anyone who is potentially facing an immigration issue, legally speaking. E.g., please don't Google it. Please do not do that. I guess IMMJ would be the people that I would typically have people call for expert immigration legal advice. It is not something that your lawyer that your family's had for 20 years in some small town who does family law can handle. They cannot handle it. And if they screw it up, it can be fatal to that person's immigration case. So additionally, if somebody has criminal issues, criminal legal issues, that how that's handled can really torpedo their potential for legal, to become a citizen or things like that. So that's just anytime I'm in a space where I can say that.
IMMJ maintains a list of all of the AILA certified attorneys or DOJ reps for the entire state of Iowa. The American Immigration Lawyer Association, it's a particular specific credential. If you are working with someone who wants to help, that's great. But if they are not AILA certified,
It's not great.
it will likely do more harm than good. And in this administration, mistakes can put people into deportation proceedings. Please refer to that list only.
Can I also real quick comment? Also, just to remember how long this process takes. My husband, speaking from experience, came here at 17.
Speak up.
Yeah, my husband came here at 17 as an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. We got the Obama pardon, and we just filed for his citizenship. So he will be done after 20 years. This is extremely long, gruesome. So if you screw something up for a family, it is fatal.
Yeah.
So please just remember that it's a long process.
Maybe time for one more. Yeah.
Steve Johnson, Brotherlands Medical Center. We're one of the new neighbors over here. Thanks to Polk County and all the work that was done with the Polk County Life Services Center. We just celebrated 1 year. So we have walk-in mental health services for adults. We have to provide all the interpretation, whether it's in person. We have 7 full-time interpreters back at our main campus. They come up here. We can also do it via iPad. And so we've got therapy, medication management. We're also building in the addiction world. I heard some talk of that. It's becoming much more standard to have medication assisted treatment. So medications then that can assist people in a recovery process, just gives them more choices. Then St. Vincent Paul operates the sobering center, which is fantastic. They're averaging about 3 patients a day, which I think is great. And so alternatives to emergency room or jail. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. And then for children, UniPoint also opened up a urgent walk-in for children. That's right up by Lutheran Hospital, brand new building. So
We met a few years ago at
We
the
did.
Bureau, yeah. So we're very fortunate to be with Rachel Adams and her department.
Yeah, Rachel. Well, it was really her idea that brought us to that building.
So, that experience has transitioned over to the development of Global Neighbors, and we know that we'll
Try to be.
we don't have a choice. We're neighbors, so we'll find a way.
We'll
We'll find a way to work together.
And
Yeah.
I appreciate all
Yeah,
your.
yeah. Right on.
All right, thank you, Mark and Stephanie, for the discussion today. Before I let you go, just a couple of things. We did record today's session, and that will be up online either later today or tomorrow on our emergency management website. You go into our training page, you can find past recordings, and this will be up there. So if you want to go back to anything and review it, you can. And before you leave, if you can, fill out the evaluation sheet that's at your table. We certainly appreciate it. We'd love to hear your feedback and ideas for any future topics that you'd like to hear. And you could just leave it at the table or leave it at the front desk on your way out. Other than that, I don't want to speak for Mark or Stephanie, but we'll close up the program here today. But you are welcome to remain here in the EOC if you've got any further questions or discussion amongst yourselves. There's no rush to kick you out of here, so you can continue any conversation or questions you've got in terms of what anyone's got for time. But thank you all for being here today and joining us for this session. And hopefully we'll see you again sometime in 2026, believe it or not.